Welcome to our next lesson in Microsoft Word. I've chosen yet another space modeled example. This one's from the online magazine The Verge, which I will provide a link to at a later time, which will be included with this document when you actually have access to it. So this is quite a lengthy article. I've chosen to keep one of the images in it just for demonstration purposes, and you'll notice that I've done tight wrapped, or rather, yeah, it should be tight. There we go, tight wrapped text, so the text stays around, so whenever I move my image, it works in with the text. So I'm going to just leave that alone for the moment. Our main concern for today is working with columns. So what you'll notice with many articles, the vast majority of the time, is that columns are used to shrink down the horizontal amount of reading that the eye has to do. Now, in particular, I'm actually going to highlight this and bring this down to font size 10. And I'll just save that so that your version of the document is like that. So this starts to get quite difficult to read. Columns make your life quite a lot easier as a reader. You see, the human eye doesn't like to travel as far across the page and then skip down a line. It's actually very easy to get lost, and it increases the amount of time you have to spend reading. So it was realized a long time ago that you could cover a large page with lots of text that's relatively small if you can turn it into columns. So there is a column function built right into Microsoft Word. So if we go into Layout, there's this handy dandy column thing down here, and if we select columns, it basically automatically formats our entire document into 3 columns. Now, I'm not saying that this is the best way to do things, and in fact I'm saying it's definitely not even an okay way of doing things, but it is a quick formatting method. So this is very much like when we're working with paragraphs and we're reformatting things. We want to be selective about the formatting that we're doing. I also strongly suggest that if you're taking some text and you're planning to put it into columns, type the text first. It's much easier to deal with wonky formatting problems when you're going through the process of formatting existing text as opposed to typing directly into columns. Now, that's my humble opinion, and I'm sticking with it. So, first off, let's go ahead and format our title as a title, format our subtitle as a subtitle, and I've left our author attribution as it exists, but let's see if there's some sort of heading, title, subtitle. Oh, we don't want quote, we don't want intense quote. Subtle reference, let's do that. Okay, so let's make sure that our title is completely at the top. This is also, if I'm being honest, a pretty crummy title to an article. It is way too many words, but this is what we've been given, so let's work with it. We'll uppercase everything in the title just to make it a little bit more newspapery. Now what we're going to do is we'll leave this very top chunk of text alone. We'll leave that as a standing piece of standing paragraph, just for interest's sake. What I would like you to do is justify the text. So when we justify and center now, justify the text is going to be a much more visually appealing to the average reader. So what I want to do is basically take all text in the various pages and turn it into columns. I'm going to get rid of this picture and not like actually delete it, but just drag it down to the bottom of the page so that we can deal with it a little bit later. I'll drag that onto another page here. Oh, we have multiple pages. In fact, I'm just going to Control X and cut that out entirely. I'll place it right near the bottom. Okay, so now we've got a ton of text to work with. So reading through this could be really quite daunting. So what I'm going to do is select all of the text basically from here down and turn it into 3 columns. So what will happen is our columns will end exactly at this line. Anything typed in below would be standard paragraph format. So we're going to hit design, or sorry, layout rather. We're going to go columns, and we'll go Let's go 3. So with our 3 columns here, I'm going to zoom out so we can take a better look at this. With our 3 columns, we're already starting to see some better arrangement of items within our article. But let's not stop there. In fact, I actually find that there's quite a lot of space in between these columns. So we're going to change up our default for our columns. I just hit Control Z to undo. Instead of using one of the presets for columns, we're going to go more columns. So this gives us the option to do more than just the 3, or to change to columns that are perhaps a little bit lopsided. If I go right, for example, we get a longer, a wider set of text and on the left, and a narrower set of text on the right. But what I'd like to do is we'll start with 3 columns is what we're looking for. Now there's a spacing option here which says the spacing in between is going to be ½ an inch, which I find visually is a little bit larger than perhaps is necessary. So we're going to dial that back to 0.3 inches, and then what you'll notice is that each of the columns adjusts in basic size, and basic width rather, to accommodate that smaller spacing, and likewise if you do extra spacing they get smaller as well. So smaller spacing will go 0.3, and we'll keep our column width equal throughout. You could, and then actually let's just take a look at what this looks like. Okay, that's pretty good. We're going to hit Justify here. Oopsie. And there we go. That's already looking quite a lot better. Fairly easy to read, and you'll notice that that with the Justify function, our columns are looking very visually separated, but there's no giant gaps between words. It's very, very nice and easy to read. I'm going to undo that though, because we're going to go a little bit further with that. Heading back into layout. Now, you should always have your rulers active. I should say this: if your rulers aren't active, just head over to View, click off Rulers, and that'll show your ruler along the top of the page. You need to do that whenever we're working in this program, because we're talking about layout, and whenever you're talking about layout, you need to be able to see the numbers behind the layout of the page. So we'll go over to layout and go back to columns, drop down, hit more columns, and get back into the nitty gritty. We'll hit 3 columns. We'll take that spacing down to 0.3 inches. What I'd still like to do though is let's add a line between. That's going to give some nice further visual separation. And we're just going to, as you can see, you can actually choose to do the whole document. We're just doing selected text, because we don't want the whole document. We simply want what we've selected. I'm going to hit OK. And there we go. Now we have this nice line in between. Makes things much easier. Your eyes just tend to stop right there. Once again, we'll go ahead and justify all of this. Okay, now we're looking at something that's approaching more of a newspaper style article. So working with columns is really quite easy, I would say. It definitely does not add complexity, but definitely adds a sort of aesthetic appeal, let's say. And I mean, really, everything we've done in Microsoft Word so far has been aesthetically appealing. So speaking of aesthetic appeal, I'm going to take this photo, and I'm just going to cut it by hitting Control X. You can also right-click and click Cut. I'm going to place this in the middle of our second page. Let's put it right there. And as you can see, because I've got tight text wrapping turned on, Microsoft Word is trying to do its best to sort around my picture. And this picture is from the original article, and it's, I think, JPL, which is the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or NASA released the picture, so not actually my picture. So I'm just going to resize that till I feel like it fits. Maybe I'll just cover 2 columns with it. There, that looks a little bit better. Now, I think in the middle of the page, or just somewhere within our document, there's also opportunity for us to use a quote. Okay, so here's a quote. I just went like literally looking for quotation marks. Let's say we want to highlight this particular quote. I'm just going to copy it. I'm hitting Control C. And we're going to insert, because remember when we discussed early in the year that if you needed to insert a thing, if you're like, think it to yourself and you go, I want to add this to my document. I want to insert this item. This is what you're in the ribbon, you're going to find that. We're going to add a text box. And oh look, we already within our theme, we already have a quote box built in. So I'm going to shoot my text into that. And I'm going to use so the default is to continue to use the same the font that you're using when you from whatever you've copied. We're going to use keep text only so that we're keeping the font that our quote is giving us. And I'm going to bring this down. Right down here. We'll shrink her down a little bit. Make it large enough for the quote to fit in. And there we go. So now our quote is in the article. Once again, you can see here that we do have some titles. We can format these with headings. Obviously, going with a full heading is going to just make it way, way, way too big. We can quickly downsize that text if we like to size 12. I think that's what we'll do. So let's see if I do my... Nope, that's not going to work. So we'll format our chunk of text, hit heading 1, and downsize to number 12. So now we're getting some more visual breakup within the text than we had before. So we're going to do this with each of our headings. And once again, as you can see, our columns are automatically sorting themselves out to make up for this extra changing in size and space of the text that we have here. And actually, as you can see here, this is got two articles in the text here. I'm going to get rid of this one and this one. Those are my mistake. Those are that's a quote and a reference that were listed in the article that I forgot to delete. So let's get rid of them. There's also this one here. Let's get rid of that. I think those are all of them, just because we want to stick with the basic text that our file already provides for us. So I don't see any other titles, which is good. And then maybe on this page, maybe we don't want to have all columns. Like this is a large page. We're seeing like lots of long columns. There is still some visual breakup, but what if we wanted to get rid of some columns? So let's say this section here. What happens if we would go to Layout, go to Columns, and go to one column? Well, bingo bango, you now have a justified chunk of text right at the top, just like we have here, and our columns continue below it. So just a little something new that we could use. Let's undo that really quick, and let's use this whole piece of text right here. We're going to take this whole chunk of column. We're going to change over to one column, and all we're telling Microsoft Word to do is to take this text and fit it into a single page-wide column, and then just shift everything else that's around it. I didn't like that very much. It doesn't provide a nice visual effect, so we're just going to get rid of that. But that's sort of an interesting thing that you can do. And then we have our last page here. It looks a little funny, a little bit orphaned, but that's okay. So now we have a much more newspaper article style document that really has the correct feel, the correct aesthetic of an article. Now normally there are some other things you would do, like normally you'd have some citations around the image and that sort of thing, but we're not going to worry about that. This one has been really more about sorting text into columns. So what we're going to do as a last step, just to get some text out of a column that's currently in a column, We're going to take this last little bit here, columns 1, and now we've got a little bit of stuff at the very end of the article. Maybe we'll give enter once just to give some space, and that just sort of shows that this is the very, very end of the article. This is the conclusion here. Now, unfortunately, our quote has sunk. There we go. And it's centered. When you see that little green line pop up, what that means is that the center of the box is matching up with the center of the page. Okay, there we go. That's looking pretty good. If you wanted to, like when you see when I click inside of a column, you can see my tabs. So my first line indent, my hanger, they change to fit within these white sections, which are the new bounds of our column. So you can change the bounds of the column just like right from here. But of course, because our columns, if you remember in our column box, are set to all be equal in size, what you're going to do is effectively reduce the column size of every single column all at once. So I would recommend that. If you'd like to have one of your columns change in size, maybe make it smaller, make another one larger, you can fine-tune that right in under columns, and once again, and just go more columns. So that's always an option. So dragging these margins doesn't really help you at all. So I just hit Control Z to undo that. So there's your final document. Go ahead and do your edits and submit this to your OneNote. Thanks again. I guess we'll see you next lesson.